We've been talking about transportation throughout today, and we've interviewed a number of people, whether it's Mitch Landrieu at the White House, mayors, as well as the head of Amtrak. And it is one of the most important issues and one of the most divisive issues in this Congress. Even though the bipartisan infrastructure bill did pass, it passed with minimal Republican support. And at one point, that was tied to what, at that point, was the Build Back Better. And we thought we were going to get kind of a dual deal, and Congress was going to pass them both. But that didn't work out. The infrastructure bill passed, but the Build Back Better did not. And we will be talking about that with our next guest. And our next guest has spent his 36-year congressional career devoted to transportation and environment issues, and is retiring this year. Congressman Peter DeFazio, the chairman of the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Bill, thanks for the opportunity.
Well, Congressman, as far as I want to get to the news of the week, is the rail worker strike that is pending come Friday. Should, some people say Congress should get involved because this is going to have, if it does happen, going to have such economic consequences. What do you think?
Well, Bob, look, I've been talking to the White House pretty regularly. They are fully engaged. They're engaged with both sides in the dispute. And, we're doing everything we can to avert, a final confrontation on, at midnight tomorrow night. And I think it's entirely possible we get a negotiated settlement. The unions are the two major unions are asking for something that is extraordinary to me that freight rail, who is immensely profitable, will not provide, which is 5 unpaid sick days. They started out asking for 5 paid sick days. Now they're just saying 5 unpaid sick days. So I can go to the doctor and not get penalized. They have point systems at BNSF now. In a certain number of points, you're fired. You go to the doctor 4 times, you're fired. When they deem it to be a critical time for the freight industry. So I think that's something the railroads could certainly afford. In fact, it doesn't cost them anything.
I wanted to talk about your op-ed that ran in The Hill, and thank you for writing that. And basically, you make the case that we had the most productive Congress since the Eisenhower era. Tell me why.
Well, the IIJA. Now, I'll grant at the beginning, it doesn't have all the policies I wanted to deal with climate and fossil fuel reduction, but it does have the most significant measures ever passed and augmented by what's in the IRA later, the Reinvestment Act, on climate. There's a total of $44 billion in the bill dealing with climate resilience. The administration is attempting to even go a bit further. They're trying, through guidance, to have states do what was in my bill, which is fix it first. Before you go out and build a whole bunch of new lane miles, first repair what you have. Repair the 400,000 bridges on the national highway system that need work. Repair the 40% of the national highway system that's deteriorated so much you have to rebed it and resurface it. And then, of course, the $100 billion backlog in transit. And then also fix it first was, well, look at alternatives. Is there a better way to move people than to keep infinitely trying to expand highways? Because a lot of places you can't do that anymore, and it's not necessarily the best way to get it done. So they're doing that in guidance. They're also conditioning some of the grants on climate issues. So it's going to be big on climate. It's huge on infrastructure. This is the largest investment in infrastructure in the history of the United States of America. Over $600 billion, and it's sorely needed. We're C- with the scoring by the American Society of Civil Engineers. We've dropped back from being the leader in the world to being essentially a laughingstock of the world in the deterioration of our system and the inefficiencies in our system. And this bill is going to do a lot to address that. So I think that's absolutely huge.
I wanted to ask, we have some questions from the audience. One question comes from Tina Wojnar, a program manager, Water and Waste Water Equipment Manufacturers Association. And her question is, will Buy America requirements from the bipartisan now law delay projects or raise project budget costs?
First off, if there are, particular components that are not available, waivers can be granted. But we want to encourage, and the president wants to encourage, U.S. manufacturing. And we have found that actually in many cases where people want to buy cheaper foreign materials, there are U.S. materials available. And yeah, maybe at a slightly higher cost, but guess what? Those people get paid a good wage in America, and they boost the economy. So, I've never been a free trader, so-called free trader, and I think we learned the folly of that during the pandemic. We can't even make N95 masks anymore, dependent upon the Chinese for all sorts of critical things. No, that's not where we want to be in the future.
You've been in the transportation world for so long, and you're retiring. You're not running for another term. How has transportation become more partisan over the years? It's a question I asked Congressman Graves earlier.
Well, we do a lot of things that aren't partisan. We passed the Water Resources Development Act, the largest ever out of the committee, total with I think three of the ultra right wing, whatever they are, voted against it, but all the other Republicans voted for it. Passed the House with a huge margin, again bipartisan. Coast Guard, again, I think that may have been unanimous. There may have been a few, again, of these Republicans who won't vote for any bill. So, that's another major bill we have pending, the Water Resources Development Bill. When it came to transportation, they said that climate didn't belong in a transportation bill, and they opposed, the bill I proposed in the House. And then, of course, the Senate bill, really pulled back on the climate issues, but they still, all but 12 of them voted against it, which is pathetic because Trump said it was horrible, it wasn't any good. This is the guy who told us he was going to put $2 billion in. He said it was too much money. Well, this isn't, $2 trillion.
$2 trillion, right. Yep.
$2 trillion, right, yeah. Yep. So it's just sour grapes on his part, and of course, they're all afraid of him. So all but 12 House Republicans voted against rebuilding our deteriorated infrastructure, including wastewater and drinking water. That was pathetic.
Congressman, you've always spoke your mind, and I remember we interviewed you after the stimulus was passed in the Obama administration. You voted against it. The former president wasn't really happy with that. I just what are your reflections on your career, and what do you plan to do now that you're retiring from Capitol Hill?
Well, the last big thing I wanted to get done, and I started under Obama, was a major increase in investment in surface transportation. I was proposing $350 billion increase. We had $600 billion. So even though it's not all the policies I wanted, that was kind of the last big thing. Last Congress, I got finally, after 25 years, starting with Bud Huster, the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund created. That's another $1 billion a year to deal with the critical needs of our harbors in terms of shoaling and in terms of deteriorating breakwaters, in terms of modernizing our ports for larger ships. So, I feel really good about the things that I've gotten done over the years, and I just didn't have any major objectives in my committee looming in front of me. Another FAA bill. Hey, the FAA hasn't implemented some of the most critical reforms in my last FAA bill. I'm still fighting with them over that. Flight attendant duty time, secondary barriers. I just felt that it was a logical time. My district got better. I've got a great candidate running. So I believe a Democrat can hold it. She wants to be on Transportation Infrastructure Committee and continue the legacy.
Sam Graves earlier was expressing cautious optimism that the House will flip. You're one of 31 retirements in the House. Do you think that Democrats can defy the odds and keep control of the lower chamber?
Well, things have changed pretty dramatically in the last 6 months. 6 months ago, they were writing the House off. Now we find people who were underwater in their polling for re-election on the issue particularly of choice. and then the accomplishments this summer, are suddenly finding that, when they emphasize those things, they're up in the polls. So if I were the Republicans, I wouldn't run around measuring the drapes yet. It's not going to be a normal midterm presidential year. It's not going to be like Obama, where we took a shellacking. And we took it because he did not, the Recovery Act was not oriented toward putting people back to work and building infrastructure, even though he went around leaning on shovels a lot. So that's why I voted against it. It could have been a bill that would put a hell of a lot of people. In fact, John Mica, who took over when the Republicans took over, said, if you had prevailed in that debate and you guys had actually done a lot of infrastructure, you probably would be sitting in this chair.
As far as just last question on, do you think that the administration is doing a good job of implementing the new transportation law?
Well, yeah, they're rolling out things very quickly. We've got Landrieu. DOT in most of the categories there, first off, the states get their 40% increase in their level of funding automatically. So they know that money's there. And then there are a whole bunch of new programs that the administration has been rolling out quickly. Grants are being rendered. They're working now on the last biggest piece, the mega grants, and they're doing well there. Now, we were a little slower over in rail because we have never made major investments in rail before, particularly in Amtrak. So they're gearing up over there to get that done. But that will happen.
It was quite an accomplishment getting that bill. I know it was ugly there. Sausage making and legislating can be ugly, but you got it done. Congressman Peter DeFazio, the chairman of the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee, thanks for joining us, and hope you have a great retirement.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.